Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome into your Hog Hoop Report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Evan Kamiko. Kevin, another week, more players entered the transfer portal who were Arkansas Razorbacks last season. Now, we don't know where they're going to go this season. The biggest of the two, Devo Davis, has entered earlier this week. Also, freshman guard Layden Blocker has entered the portal as well. Kevin, let's start with Devo. First and foremost, when you look back at Devo's entire career up until this point at Arkansas, what's the biggest thing that you're going to remember about his time here in Fayetteville?
Just how instrumental he was in the Eric Musselman era of success, back-to-back Elite Eight, Sweet 16s. None of that happens without the contributions of Devo Davis. Some of those on grand stages where he had some of his best games. And Arkansas's had some really good players come in and out, but he's been the one mainstay. 4 years under Muss. That's a heavy lift when you look at a player in college basketball any longer being 4 years in any place. And then Musselman in just 5 seasons, that's the guy that's been with him the longest. So, I think Devo Davis, his legacy is cemented by the positives. There were some stuff with him leaving the program a couple of times the last 2 years. Didn't have his best season this year, but he's a guy that to me is one of the, when you look at it from a statistical standpoint and some of the boxes he's checked, when you look at it from, again, impact in big games and what he's meant to postseason success and regular season success for that matter as well. One of the best players to come through the program. And so, it's probably the bet. I've been hearing for a while that Devo was going to move on after this season. He's in the transfer portal. I've already been contacted by Division I assistant coaches and head coaches about Devo, including from the SEC. Not surprised by that at all. There are programs from all over the country that are already making contact with Devontae Devo Davis. So we'll see where he ends up, but he's also looking at pro opportunities. We know he did that a year ago before returning to Arkansas for year 4, a season that didn't work out like everybody wanted, certainly not for Devo, but a great career nonetheless, Evan.
Absolutely. And you're always going to look back on it and remember the positives of a player more than the negatives, especially with someone like Devo, who is so, cataclysmic in them getting, like you said, to those Elite Eights and the Sweet 16. As for another player from the Hogs that hit the portal, freshman guard Layden Blocker, he's recently hit the portal, said, he was so thankful to come home, but his time now, he's got to go elsewhere and look. And again, I think, Kevin, this is an overarching thing that we talk about all the time. This Layden Blocker leaves the Hogs with 0 Arkansans on the roster. And we talk about it week in and week out that it's so important to keep your local kids, your in-state kids in-state. And now there's no more in-state kids here in Fayetteville. What does that mean for, first of all, Eric Musselman's program and then just the larger, broader scale of college basketball right now?
Well, I'm not sure if the walk-on big man is still around, Lawson Blake. He's a Fayetteville guy, but you're right. The scholarship players, we talked about Devo, Layden Blocker, Joseph Pinion a week or so ago into the portal. Arkansas has had a huge imprint on this program. Arkansas players, throughout the decades. Eddie Sutton, the famed triplets, all from Arkansas. Nolan Richardson, his national championship team. Heavy influence from Arkansas, especially when we look at Corliss Williamson. And even Eric Musselman, that's been true. Moses Moody, arguably the most important player he's gotten. And then the program's first one and done and a lottery pick. And the list goes on. Guys like Isaiah Joe, who helped Musselman. Jalen Williams, 2 years and off to the pros, back-to-back Elite Eights. We talk about Devo Davis. Nick Smith Jr., who not only helped Arkansas get to the NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16 last year, despite battling injuries and missing 19 games, very crucial in helping recruit other 5-star McDonald's All-Americans and Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh to the program. So I would say Arkansas players continue to be the most important part and lifeblood of Arkansas recruiting and the success on the court. So that's been true regardless of who the head coach is. Now, Eric Musselman has put a big emphasis on the transfer portal. That's always been the case. There's been a less and less emphasis the last 2 high school recruiting cycles. When you look at 2 players signing each of those, 1 Arkansan among those, Layden Blocker now in the portal. And so I think it's one of those things moving forward. When you look at the names I just mentioned, how does that play out? Because there's big-time players in state when we look at the 2025 and 2026 classes upcoming. Arkansas did not land a name or sign anybody out of the high school class of 24, and we've got one of those players staying in the SEC and going to Missouri and Keanu Boateng. So I think, there's definitely some optics there. But what those mean and what impact they have moving forward in Arkansas recruiting with the Razorbacks remains to be seen. The parents and players that I talk to still have an excitement level with the Razorbacks and Eric Musselman, and I think that's a lot of that has to do with the results he's had, the success he's had, the branding and marketing stuff that he does. So I think there's still some positives there, including some of the transfer guys we're about to talk about when we start looking at the focus on the transfer portal recruiting. But I'll tell you, Evan, Arkansas. When we look at again at what the in-state guys have done, I don't think there's another way. That's not a spin to say they've been the most critical to the success of this program, and that goes way beyond the time that Eric Musselman's been here.
Yeah, and Layden Blocker is going to have no shortages of teams who are going to reach out and have interest to him as one of, at first in that Duke game, really exciting early in the year, young freshman prospect that was getting national attention. So now he'll move on. He'll move to his next place, and best of luck to Layden Blocker. And you kind of tease what we're going to talk about now, so let's switch gears and talk about that. As for the transfer portal, it seems like right now, with all the uncertainty and unknown of Eric Musselman as the head coach, the staff is still out in recruiting and in full force talking to guys in the transfer portal. So what are you hearing from that transfer portal of guys that Arkansas is interested, whether that's, other Power 5 transfers or mid-major guys looking to make the jump to the SEC?
Eric Musselman and his staff are arguably the best in college basketball at portal recruiting. Now, look, the results weren't there this past year, but I going back to those back-to-back Elite Eights followed by a Sweet 16. And I talked about the Arkansas kids, how instrumental they were. So was the transfer portal. I mean, we start rattling off names like J.D. Notte, Justin Smith, Jalen Tate, Stanley Amudi, Otis Tony. Some of these guys, I mean, you look at some of the impact, and some of these guys are now Ricky Council the fourth. We start looking at some of these guys and getting run in the NBA now. And so Arkansas, when you look at Eric Musselman, they're among the best out there, and that continues right now. I mean, Arkansas, that we know of, is into the 40s, 40-plus players they've contacted. They've kind of drilled down on some of that. Some of the staff was on campus doing FaceTime and virtual stuff, meeting with players. Some of the staff was on the road, and they're just kind of coming and going, getting out on the road already. Arkansas' season only ended a week ago Thursday, and already not only are they making all these contacts and casting the wide net, Evan, but the coaching staff is doing more than just making the contacts, getting on the road, seeing players, again, doing the virtual meetings. And they do a great job of mixing and matching how they do that with the staff. Send some guys out, bring them back, others go out. And there's several names already that Arkansas's kind of zeroed in on. One of those, by the way, Josh Cohen, 6'10" forward out of UMass. Now, this is a guy that started his career at St. Francis out of Pennsylvania. A year ago when he got in the portal, Arkansas was all over him, recruited him. He ends up at UMass. A big season, nearly 16 points a game, nearly 7 rebounds a game, shoots over 54% from the field. He's a guy that's a little bit versatile with size at 6'10", but he's coming in for a visit. He's going to visit Arkansas. It's the first visitor name that's kind of gone public. I've been able to verify with a few folks that visit's coming up pretty quick. He's going to have a busy week because he also has visits playing to Notre Dame and Xavier. Intentions, according to some national reporting, that he'll also look to visit Penn State. Remember, he played at St. Francis in Pennsylvania for a couple of years before moving on to UMass. But here's a guy, when you look at front line, and we didn't go through who Arkansas's got coming back, that we think, as far as they haven't made announcements yet, so still possibly coming back. Only 4 names, 2 of those on the front line, and Trevor Brazile, who, by the way, I think is going to, at minimum, test the NBA draft waters. We'll see if he leaves open the possibility of coming back. Bay Fall, who will basically be a freshman again next year, wherever he is, if that's Arkansas. He didn't play a lot, probably fewer minutes than anybody other than the senior transfer, Denaje Harris, who's also in the portal, by the way. So not a lot of names there, but Josh Cohen is one of those first names getting a visit on the front line where Arkansas's got to replace guys like Mekhi Mitchell and Jalen Graham, who have moved on. And so we keep, Chandler Lawson as well. So we keep an eye on that, and potentially Brazile. Obviously, he's got opportunities to move on to the pro level. We'll see. With his body of work on the college level, we'll see what determinations he's make. But I do think he'll go through that draft pool process to see, to measure himself there. And then the other, I mentioned the name Cohen. There's a lot of other names out there. Clifford Omarui, 6'11" forward center out of Rutgers. Big time player, one of the most coveted guys in the portal. Nearly 3 blocks per game, over 10 points. a big rebounder as well.
And to kind of cut you off,
He's a
I've gotten the chance to see Amori in person multiple times when I was back in Indiana covering Indiana Rutgers, and he's the real deal. You know, he's somebody big frame, not scared to get physical. That, you know, he's kind of the heart and soul for a little bit of that Rutgers team, allowing guys like Paul Mulcahy when he was there and, you know, Ron Baker Jr. to really get going. So he'd be a really fun name to watch.
He's one of the guys that Arkansas's moved forward a little bit on. I'm going to leave it at that and not say much more about that. But Arkansas has progressed a bit with him. We'll see where it goes. There's a couple of names that Arkansas did some of the virtual meetings with that are technically, I haven't reported yet, that are on the list of guys that have been contacted. And I haven't seen any of the national folks either. Keeping that under the lid for now, too. I know fans don't want to hear that. But one of these guys is a versatile, big, multi-positional type player that hurt Arkansas in the recent past in a game that Arkansas lost. And so there's some other guys out there, but Arkansas is kind of checking off some of the local guys I'm going to talk about. Cameron Hunter, we've mentioned him, 6'3" guard, physical point guard. The UCA transfer, did not play this past season, was in the portal this time last year, took an unofficial visit to Arkansas, ended up committing to Butler, backed out of that, returned to UCA, got injured, had a foot injury in October during a close scrimmage, and did not play this past season. He's got 2 years to go. Arkansas coaches have been in touch with his family. Just today, he had a long conversation with Ronnie Brewer Jr., Arkansas assistant coach and recruiting coordinator. I fully expect he'll be talking most likely with Muss very soon. But a guy to keep an eye on in state, Kylan Milton, a 6'4" guard at Arkansas Pine Bluff, Division I, put up really good numbers. Arkansas has been in touch with him. He's a guy that's a coveted player by some high major programs. When you look around. So another Arkansan, he's originally from Conway, got to cover him in high school as well as Cameron Hunter, who I just mentioned. And then Talon Peters, another guy out of Russellville, another guy from Arkansas, Division II All-American Player of the Year in his conference at Arkansas Tech. Multiple high majors looking at him, including Arkansas. The Razorbacks have been in touch with him, as has Oklahoma and some other high majors. So those are just three in-state names. Another one, if he enters the portal, and I think he might, is Corey Washington. Big season at St. Peter as a sophomore, was teammates with Nick Smith Jr. On that North Little Rock State Championship team 3 years ago. St. Peter's just lost in the NCAA tournament, but I think that was Tennessee that took them behind the woodshed in the first round.
I had a close eye on that game.
He's not in the portal, but he might. He might be. I'm hearing he might get in there, and if he does, that's a name. Arkansas, took a look at him coming out of high school, and he's a guy I think Arkansas would probably talk to if he does get in the portal. I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself there. I don't have something solid to report that's happening because he's not in there at this time, and we'll see if he does. But he's another local guy, another Arkansan that might have Arkansas interest. So we talk about recruiting in Arkansas, and a lot of it's the high school stuff and really staying true to that when you can. We've seen some departures recently, but we're also seeing Arkansas now getting back with in-state guys who have been at the Division I level, have experience. We know Musman loves that experience when he starts building a roster. So there is some Arkansas flavor amongst all these names. A lot of really good players in the portal, guys that Arkansas faced in non-conference play on the mid-major level, and some high-major guys. Several that I like. I mentioned some names, but the thing just keeps turning. Again, Arkansas's coaching staff on the road. Some stayed back while some are on the road, and they kind of mix that up. But getting a lot of those virtual meetings in now, Evan, as we move along in portal recruiting.
Absolutely. The portal is only heating up now as, the second round of the NCAA tournament is getting, wrapping up again later today. So we'll obviously have more on the portal over the next couple of weeks. It'll be really fun to watch. But Kevin, anything else before we go?
Not really. It's March Madness, the coaching carousel, portal recruiting. What's your roster look like? Arkansas's had 5 players going to the portal. It may not be over, but there's only 4 remaining names. And so we, that's on the roster we went through. 2 of those on the front line, obviously Tremont Mark and Caleb Battle. We look to see what those 2 guys do. Probably Arkansas's 2 most prolific players when you look at, production last year. Mark more consistently, certainly Battle toward the end of the season. And so those things go into consideration for this coaching staff as they're recruiting the portal, because they're trying to figure out, who are we keeping? Are we keeping anybody? How do we get complementary pieces around them? You try to pay attention to some of the names Arkansas's drilling down on in the portal, because it kind of helps you understand who are they trying to retain of what's left and who might still be moving on. And those things will shake out. But I think also, Evan, I want to add this. These are kind of global looks at things. When you look over the last several seasons, a lot of that has been about coming off successful seasons and just trying to make tweaks and changes, even though they've turned things around, turn it over by large numbers. Musselman's really tried to figure out how can we improve. This is a little bit different because you're coming off one of the worst seasons in program history, certainly under Musselman at Arkansas, and the dynamics may and the stakes are a little higher, but the dynamics are a little bit different. You're not necessarily trying to tweak what's been working. Now you're trying to maybe get back to the drawing board a little bit and figure out what was working before and get some of that again. It's a little bit different. I think the other thing is when you're selling the success of the previous seasons in recruiting, it makes it easier. Now you've got to explain what happened this past year and how you think you can get it back on course. So the recruiting dynamic changes a little bit. NIL plays more and more into this. And you hope Arkansas is going to firm things up there because everything I've heard is maybe not so good in that part lately, but that stuff can be fluid. And certainly those are things that you want to get your arms around, get it right when you're recruiting. So there's a lot of stuff going on, I think, in this recruiting cycle that's a little bit different in previous years, sort of from a global look at it, not just talking about specific names and positions of need, but how you sell your program and some of the things that are going to come up in some of these conversations.
Absolutely. It's a new time in college basketball, really, a new era of college athletics with NIL and all of that. But that's going to do it for your Hog Hoop Reports for this Sunday. For Kevin McPherson, I'm Evan Kamika. Thank you for tuning in all week long, and we will see you next Sunday.